You'd think the words, "You're going to want to see this," would inspire excitement, or at least curiosity. Instead, they triggered the Galactic Council's most widespread panic since someone accidentally declared war over a mistranslated dessert recipe. "See what?" asked Veltrix, his crystalline body vibrating faintly, a telltale sign of alien anxiety. Dr. Evan Grant grinned, holding up a sleek metallic device about the size of a toaster. Just the next step in universal science, or at least a very interesting experiment. Veltrix's glow dimmed. "Human, your experiments have a reputation." "You mean our breakthroughs have a reputation," Grant corrected, adjusting his glasses with a flourish. "Remember quantum communications? You're welcome, by the way." "This feels different," muttered Commander Axith, a towering reptilian alien with glinting emerald scales. His arms were crossed in what humans might call the universal language of disapproval. "Oh, it's different, all right," Grant replied cheerfully. "It's going to blow your mind, figuratively speaking." Grant placed the Quantum Horizon Manipulator, QHM, onto a pedestal in the middle of the Galactic Research Symposium's main hall. The room, packed with alien delegates, buzzed with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Holographic banners floated above the assembly, showcasing this year's theme, "Collaborating for a Better Galaxy." "This little beauty," Grant began, gesturing dramatically at the QHM, "is designed to manipulate the fabric of space-time on a quantum level." "Humans always overreach," Axith growled. "What is the practical application?" "Practical? Who needs practical when you have science?" Grant replied with a wink. "Besides, imagine instantaneous travel or faster-than-light communication without pesky wormholes. This could revolutionize—" Veltrix interrupted, his glow flickering. "And what safeguards do you have against catastrophic failure?" Grant waved a dismissive hand. "Relax, it's perfectly safe. Probably." "Probably," Axith hissed, his frills flaring. "You're presenting a device that might shatter reality, and your assurance is probably." "Well," Grant said, rubbing the back of his neck, "shattering is such a strong word. I prefer reconfiguring." Grant flipped a switch on the QHM, and the device began to hum softly, emitting a faint, otherworldly glow. The hum grew louder, the glow brighter, until the air around it seemed to ripple like heat waves on a summer day. The room fell silent. "See? Totally under control," Grant said. Then reality cracked. A shimmering rift opened above the device, pulsing with chaotic energy. Gravity wavered. Aliens found themselves floating one moment, then slammed back into their seats the next. Objects froze mid-air, only to vanish and reappear in new locations. And faint whispers, eerie and unintelligible, echoed through the hall. Veltrix's crystalline body dimmed further. "This is safe?" "Okay," Grant admitted, backing away slightly. "This might be a bit more dramatic than anticipated." Axith roared, his scales flaring as he struggled to maintain his balance. "Shut it down, before we all get pulled into whatever that is." Grant waved his hands frantically over the QHM, which now seemed to have a mind of its own. "Working on it. It's a new device. The manual's still in beta." The rift grew larger, and through it, glimpses of strange, shadowy landscapes appeared, worlds that didn't obey the laws of physics as anyone knew them. A figure, tall and indistinct, flickered into view for a moment, before retreating into the rift. The whispers grew louder. "This is not science," Veltrix whispered. "This is madness." Grant didn't look up, his fingers dancing across the QHM's controls. "Madness? No, no, no. Madness was trying to explain black holes to my first-grade teacher. This is an opportunity." "Opportunity to die," Axith growled, gripping his chair as gravity wobbled again. Grant's hands paused for a split second, his expression softening. "Do you trust me?" "No," Veltrix and Axith said in unison. Grant smirked. "Fair enough, but you will." You'd think an interstellar symposium would have protocols for when space-time decides to take an unscheduled coffee break. But judging by the chaos in the room, no one had written that chapter yet. The rift above the Quantum Horizon Manipulator, QHM, shimmered ominously, growing larger with each pulse. Whispers emanating from it morphed into distant, otherworldly murmurs that sent chills down every alien spine and a few crystalline bodies. "Grant!" Commander Axith bellowed, his claws digging into the podium. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster. That thing is starting to move." "It's not moving," Dr. Evan Grant replied, frantically adjusting the QHM settings. "It's, shifting. Subtle difference." "That is not helpful," Veltrix snapped, his crystalline edges vibrating with what humans might call full-blown panic. "Do you understand what's happening?" "Of course I understand," Grant said, his voice tight with concentration. "I built the thing. Well, mostly. Mostly." Axith's frills flared. "Who else is responsible for this madness?" "Technically, the universe is also playing a part," Grant quipped, not looking up. The rift pulsed again, and this time the effects were even stranger. A crystalline alien delegate froze mid-sentence, their body refracting light in a kaleidoscope of colors. Time seemed to stutter. Objects fell in slow motion before snapping back into place. Then came the whispers. No longer distant and faint, they grew louder, more insistent, forming unintelligible words that made the room vibrate with tension. "What are they saying?" Veltrix asked, his glow dimming to near opacity. Grant shrugged, sweat dripping from his forehead. "No clue. Could be the cosmic equivalent of, 'Get off my lawn,' or maybe, 'Welcome, visitors.' Really depends on their tone." "They don't sound welcoming," Axith growled, gripping his sidearm. "If they come through, I'll be ready." "Oh, please," Grant said, glancing up for the first time. "If they can manipulate space-time, do you really think a plasma gun is going to stop them? You'd be better off throwing snacks at them." Before Axith could respond, the shimmering hologram of a Galactic Council elder materialized in the center of the room. Their crystalline form flickered, as if the rift's energy was interfering with their projection. "Human," the elder's voice resonated with authority. "Explain this. Abomination." Grant straightened, still tweaking the QHM. "It's not an abomination, it's science. Admittedly, science with a few hiccups, but still science." The elder's form dimmed slightly, their crystalline body crackling faintly. "You have unleashed chaos upon this assembly. The Galactic Council demands you shut it down immediately." Grant hesitated, his fingers hovering over the controls. Shutting it down could collapse the rift uncontrollably. We'd have a black hole on our hands. "And not shutting it down?" Veltrix asked. "Could also end badly," Grant admitted, "but with more style." As the debate continued, the rift pulsed once more, and something stepped through. It wasn't solid, not exactly. A shimmering, shadowy figure emerged, its form flickering like static on an old television. It didn't attack or move aggressively. It simply observed. The entire room fell silent. Even Axith froze, his claws still gripping his weapon. The figure's face, if it could be called that, turned slowly, as if scanning the room. "What is it?" Veltrix whispered. Grant tilted his head, squinting at the entity. "Not sure. Maybe an advanced life form? Or a reflection of a higher dimensional being?" "Can it hear us?" Axith asked, his voice uncharacteristically low. "Let's hope not," Grant replied, "in case it's the squash the ants kind of advanced." While the aliens remained frozen in fear, Grant's hands moved steadily over the QHM's controls. Despite the mounting tension, his voice remained calm. "All right, let's stabilize this thing before it decides we're not worth keeping around." "You act as if this is routine," Veltrix snapped. Grant grinned. "Have you met humans? Chaos is our routine." With a few final adjustments, the QHM emitted a series of sharp beeps, and the rift flickered. The shadowy figure turned its head toward Grant, as if acknowledging him, before retreating into the closing void. The rift shrank slightly but remained unstable, its edges crackling with energy. Veltrix approached Grant cautiously, his glow slightly brighter now. "You may have saved us for the moment, but this device is a threat to the galaxy. Or Grant countered. "It's the key to understanding it." Axith stepped closer, his weapon still at the ready. "I don't like this, human, but for now, I'll trust that you know what you're doing." Grant smirked. "Good choice. Now let's fix this mess before someone else says, 'You're gonna want to see this.' You know that moment when you realize the universe is just waiting to see how much worse things can get? That was the vibe in the room when the rift pulsed again, this time with a surge that sent shockwaves rippling through the chamber. Veltrix's crystalline edges vibrated so violently it looked like he might shatter. "The rift is growing unstable. If this continues, it will consume the station." "Relax," Grant said, though his tone was less confident than before. "We've got this under control." "We do?" Axith growled, his frills snapping back in agitation. "Because it looks like it is controlling you." Grant shot him a quick grin. "It's just a highly motivated physics problem. Nothing we haven't seen before." "On Earth, maybe," Veltrix hissed. "This is not your chaotic death world." "No," Grant said, flipping a few switches on the QHM, "but it's starting to feel like home." The rift stretched wider, its crackling edges now sparking arcs of energy that leaped unpredictably around the chamber. Objects floated and warped as gravity continued to rebel. One unlucky alien delegate yelped as their translator device transformed into a writhing mass of glowing tentacles before popping back into its original form. "Okay, that's new," Grant muttered, his fingers moving faster over the QHM's controls. "Definitely didn't plan for that." "You planned for this at all?" Axith snapped, his weapon trained on the rift, as if he could shoot the problem into submission. "Loosely," Grant admitted. "It's more of an improvise as we go situation now." Suddenly, the whispers from the rift coalesced into a strange, haunting melody that seemed to bypass physical sound and resonate directly in the mind. The shadowy figure reappeared, followed by others, vague, flickering shapes that seemed to defy solid form. Veltrix stepped back, his glow nearly extinguished. "What are those?" Grant squinted at the figures. "Higher dimensional observers, maybe? Or projections of possibilities? It's hard to say." "Could they be hostile?" Axith asked, his claws twitching near the trigger of his weapon. "Only if we make a bad impression," Grant replied. The largest figure tilted its head, if it even had a head, and extended what looked like an arm made of liquid starlight. The room's temperature dropped noticeably. "Okay, maybe a little hostile," Grant muttered. "But let's not jump to conclusions." As the figures hovered near the rift, Grant turned back to Veltrix and Axith. "Here's the plan. I need to recalibrate the QHM to send a stabilizing pulse into the rift." "Won't that make it worse?" Veltrix asked. "Not if I do it right," Grant said. "And if you do it wrong?" Axith pressed. Grant shrugged. "Then we'll all find out what's on the other side together." Veltrix groaned. "Why does every human plan involve unacceptable levels of risk?" "It's part of our charm," Grant said with a grin. "Now, are you going to help, or are you just here for the commentary?" Despite their misgivings, Veltrix and Axith joined Grant at the QHM. Veltrix used his crystalline body to stabilize the energy surges around the device, while Axith kept his weapon trained on the entities, ready for any sudden moves. "Just a little more power," Grant said, twisting a dial. "And now." The QHM emitted a high-pitched whine, and a wave of golden light surged into the rift. The entities recoiled, their forms flickering before disappearing entirely. For a brief moment, the rift began to shrink, but then it surged back, more erratic than ever. "Not good," Grant shouted. "We need more time." The rift unleashed one final pulse of energy, sending everyone in the room sprawling. As Grant scrambled to his feet, he saw the largest shadowy figure lingering at the edge of the rift. It seemed to nod in his direction before retreating into the void. With a final burst, the rift stabilized, its chaotic edges smoothing into a faint, shimmering glow. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the QHM powering down. Grant exhaled, leaning heavily against the console. "See? Told you we'd handle it?" Veltrix's glow brightened slightly. "That was reckless." Axith nodded. And utterly insane. But effective, Grant added with a smirk. The room was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the QHM. For a moment, it seemed like the chaos had passed. Veltrix cautiously approached the rift, his crystalline edges reflecting the faint shimmer of its now stable form. "It appears dormant," Veltrix said, his voice laced with uncertainty. "It's not dormant," Grant replied, still hunched over the QHM. "It's thinking." "Thinking," Axith growled, his frills flaring. "You're saying this thing has a mind?" Grant hesitated. "Not a mind, exactly. More like, it's aware. The rift isn't just a hole in space-time. It's a connection to something bigger, something alive." As if on cue, the rift pulsed once more, this time radiating a wave of energy so intense that it knocked everyone to the ground. The lights in the chamber flickered, and the air grew thick with a static charge. From the rift, shadowy tendrils began to emerge, twisting and writhing as they reached into the room. The tendrils didn't touch anything physically, but objects and even people began to distort, as if reality itself were being rewritten. "Grant!" Veltrix shouted, his glow flickering wildly. "What is happening?" "It's destabilizing again," Grant yelled, scrambling to the QHM. "The rift is reacting to the energy we put into it. It's like it's learning." "Learning to what?" Axith demanded, firing a warning shot at one of the tendrils. The energy bolt passed through harmlessly, leaving the tendril undisturbed. "Learning to fight back," Grant muttered grimly. Grant slammed his hands onto the console, his mind racing. "We need to create a feedback loop to stabilize it again. If we can match its energy signature, we might be able to neutralize it." Veltrix hesitated, his crystalline form vibrating with indecision. A feedback loop that large could overload the device. It might destroy everything in this chamber. "Better the chamber than the whole station," Axith growled. "Do it." Grant turned to them, his expression serious. "I'm going to need your help. Veltrix, you'll have to act as a conductor to stabilize the energy flow. Axith, cover us in case those tendrils get grabby." "You're asking me to risk my life," Veltrix said, his glow dimming. "I'm asking you to trust me," Grant replied. "Big difference." Veltrix reluctantly positioned himself beside the QHM, his crystalline edges crackling as they absorbed and redirected the unstable energy. Axith stood at the ready, his plasma rifle trained on the tendrils as they writhed closer. "All right," Grant said, his hands flying over the controls. "When I say now, flood the system with everything you've got." "And if it doesn't work?" Axith asked. Grant smirked. "Then at least we'll go out knowing we tried." Grant shouted, "Now!" Veltrix pulsed with brilliant light, channeling his energy directly into the QHM. The device whined and crackled as it unleashed a powerful surge into the rift. The tendrils recoiled, thrashing wildly before evaporating into nothingness. The rift pulsed one final time, its shimmering edges collapsing inward until it vanished entirely. The chamber fell silent, save for the faint hum of the QHM powering down. Grant slumped against the console, his chest heaving. "And that," he said between breaths, "is how you close a rift." Veltrix's glow returned to its normal brightness as he staggered away from the QHM. That was reckless, even by human standards. Axith lowered his weapon, his frills settling. "But effective. You saved the station." "See," Grant said with a weak smile. "Told you I had it under control." "You did not," Veltrix replied bluntly. "Fair point," Grant admitted. The Galactic Council chamber was as silent as the vacuum of space. Every delegate stared at the human, their expressions a mix of awe, disbelief, and something close to fear. The crystalline elder finally broke the silence, their shimmering body vibrating faintly. "Human Evan Grant," the elder began, their voice echoing with formal authority. "Your reckless actions could have destroyed this station. Your tampering with space-time has placed the entire galaxy at risk." Grant, still catching his breath, leaned casually on the QHM. "You're welcome." Veltrix groaned audibly, and Axith's frills bristled. "Grant," Axith muttered. "Please try not to make this worse." "Worse?" Grant replied with a grin. "We just saved the galaxy from an interdimensional crisis. I think that qualifies as better." The Elder's crystalline surface cracked faintly, a sign of intense stress. "While your ingenuity is undeniable, the Galactic Council demands assurances that such an incident will never happen again." Grant stepped forward, his tone suddenly serious. "Look, I get it. Humans are messy. We experiment, we fail, and sometimes we break things. But that's how we learn. Without risk, there's no progress. And let's be honest, if we hadn't taken this risk today, we'd all be dealing with whatever was coming through that rift." The room remained silent as the delegates processed his words. Even Veltrix and Axith, who had been critical of Grant's methods, couldn't deny the results. "Humanity isn't perfect," Grant continued, "but we don't give up, and we don't back down from a challenge. That's what makes us, well, us." The crystalline elder regarded Grant for a long moment before speaking. "The Galactic Council will deliberate on this matter. For now, humanity will be placed under observation." "Observation?" Grant asked, raising an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "Your species has proven unpredictable," the elder admitted. "And unpredictability, while dangerous, can also be a source of strength." Veltrix's glow brightened slightly. "They mean you've earned their reluctant respect. For now." Axith snorted. "Don't get too comfortable, human. You'll be on a very short leash." Grant grinned. "Leashes aren't really our thing, but thanks for the vote of confidence." As the session adjourned, Grant, Veltrix, and Axith walked together through the station's halls. The air was thick with the tension of what had just transpired. "So," Veltrix began cautiously, "what will you do with the QHM now?" "Fine-tune it," Grant replied, his tone light. "Add a few safety protocols. Maybe use it to revolutionize space travel." Axith stopped in his tracks, his frills snapping upright. "You're not serious?" Grant shrugged. "What? You think I'm going to throw it in a closet and forget about it? Come on, Axith. Progress waits for no one." Back aboard his ship, Grant stood at a console, staring at a holographic blueprint of the QHM. Despite the day's chaos, he couldn't help but feel a spark of pride. Sure, things had gotten a little out of hand, but humanity had faced the unknown and come out stronger. As he worked, a message pinged on his console. It was from the Galactic Council. Grant read the message aloud, a grin spreading across his face. "They want my expertise on a new energy anomaly? Huh, guess they can't resist a little chaos." He leaned back in his chair, muttering to himself with a chuckle. "You're gonna want to see this." Word of the incident spread quickly across the galaxy. Aliens everywhere debated whether humans were visionaries or lunatics, or both. The phrase, "You're gonna want to see this," became an infamous warning among the stars. And on Earth, humanity continued doing what it always did best, breaking barriers, taking risks, and leaving the galaxy forever changed.